Jesus withdrawing to lonely places before decisive ministry moments stands as the clearest image of prayer that shapes reality. Before calling the 12, before confronting darkness, before walking into the Garden of Agony, he prayed, not to escape life, but to enter it with clarity, love, and unshakable obedience. It is this Jesus who becomes the interpretive lens for understanding John Hyde. Because what Hyde sought in his intercession was not spectacle, it was the same raw nearness to God that empowered Christ's mission. John Hyde, praying Hyde, is often remembered for extraordinary results. Revival outbreaks, conversions by the hundreds, a region spiritually shaken. But behind the stories was a hidden cost. His intercession was so prolonged, so intense, that doctors reported his physical heart had shifted from its normal position. His chest cavity bore witness to both passion and strain. His body carried the weight of longing for a move of God, while his emotions bore the quiet ache that drove him deeper into prayer than any human system was meant to carry alone. And here lies the central tension of this video, the sacred longing to see breakthrough, and the very real human collapse that can happen when prayer becomes more of a burden than a communion. The truth many never discuss is that spiritual zeal and unresolved wounds can coexist. A person may cry out for heaven while silently bleeding on the inside. A leader may intercede for a nation while ignoring the exhaustion eroding their own soul. This is why the Holy Spirit must be named not as fuel for performance but as the gentle sanctifier, the presence that forms prayer into fruitfulness rather than self-destruction. In this video, we will uncover the hidden agonies behind Hyde's fervor, the emotional drivers, the neurophysiological mechanisms, the relational costs, and the spiritual practices that transformed him, for better and for worse. And we will offer practical, safe pathways for deep prayer today, without replicating the damage many heroic intercessors endured in silence. Write in the comments, which country and city are you watching from? Many people imagine John Hyde praying with a supernatural glow, a man lost in intercession as if untouched by the world. But the truth beneath the legend is far more human, far more costly, and far more familiar than most expect. Hyde prayed with fire because something inside him burned long before he ever saw revival. And that is where this chapter begins, with the wound behind the fire. Many intercessors who pray with unusual passion do not simply love prayer. They carry a private ache they never learned to name. It may be abandonment from childhood, a relationship torn too early, a sense of never being enough, or a fear that God might not show up unless they plead hard enough. For Hyde, the ache became fuel, but even holy fuel burns, and anything that burns must eventually be tended, or it consumes the vessel that carries it. Psychologists call this dynamic attachment-driven spirituality, when prayer is unconsciously shaped by longing for secure connection that was never fully formed in early life. The louder the cry, the deeper the internal emptiness. Many people who become passionate intercessors do not realize that part of their intensity is shaped by unresolved grief or shame. These wounds don't invalidate the prayer. They don't make the fire less genuine. They simply explain why the flames sometimes flare uncontrollably. Hyde's fervor, like the fervor of many spiritual giants, was both devotion and compensation. Devotion to God and compensation for a world that had never held his soul safely. Understanding this does not weaken the beauty of his life. It deepens it. It brings honesty into the story. And this leads to a counterintuitive truth. Spiritual zeal can coexist with unhealed trauma. Deep passion is not the same as emotional health. Many believers confuse tears with transformation, exhaustion with surrender, and intensity with maturity. But God does not measure the volume of our cry. He measures whether the cry is flowing from a healed heart or a wounded one. Hyde's heart was pure and longing, but his emotional reservoir was cracked. And when a vessel is cracked, even holy water leaks through the fractures. Many modern believers repeat the same mistake, believing that praying harder will fix what actually requires healing, therapy, community, and confrontation with hidden sorrow. Hyde's story invites us to honor devotion without romanticizing imbalance. Because of this, the first practical step is simple but confronting. Identify your why. Journal for 2 weeks your honest motives for praying intensely. Write down 3 reasons you feel compelled to pray hard. Is it need, duty, fear, longing, gratitude, or avoidance? Patterns will appear, and those patterns will tell the truth no sermon can expose. This is not self-condemnation. It is spiritual clarity. When your why becomes transparent, your prayer becomes cleaner, safer, and more fruitful. Without this clarity, even sincere zeal can drift into self-punishment. Hyde's story teaches this through metaphor as stark as it is unforgettable. A bell may ring loudly not because the tower is strong, but because the rope is frayed and someone keeps pulling. The sound is beautiful, the structure is not, and unless the rope is replaced, even the most glorious bell eventually breaks. Before we romanticize John Hyde's consuming intercession, we need to confront a biological truth that many spiritual circles ignore. The body always tells the truth, even when the spirit feels compelled to press further. Hyde prayed with such intensity that physicians reported his heart-shifting position in his chest, a vivid, literal manifestation of what chronic spiritual strain can do to a human frame. And while most believers will never reach such extremes, many silently suffer milder versions of the same pattern: palpitations after long prayer sessions, insomnia following extended fasts, trembling after intercession, or a constant feeling of inner pressure mistaken for spiritual burden. The body speaks, and when the body is ignored, it eventually breaks. The science behind this is not speculation, it is well established. When someone enters prolonged high arousal states, even spiritual ones, the sympathetic nervous system activates as though responding to threat. Heart rate rises, cortisol increases, adrenaline floods the bloodstream, the vagus nerve tightens, and the HPA axis, the body's stress regulator, shifts into overdrive. If this cycle is repeated daily without recovery, the brain begins to rewire around it. Sleep becomes lighter, irritability sharper, emotions harder to regulate. This is not lack of faith, it is physiology responding to unmoderated intensity. Hyde's fervor was real, but his exhaustion was equally real, a reminder that spiritual passion does not suspend human biology. Prayer can calm the nervous system or overload it, depending on the posture of the heart and the condition of the body entering it. This leads to a revelation many believers misunderstand. Spiritual intensity is not automatically spiritual health. A person may look on fire, yet be functioning entirely on adrenaline-based arousal. They may interpret a racing heart as anointing, when it is actually sympathetic overactivation. They may call insomnia spiritual warfare, when the body simply cannot shut down after hours of fervor without grounding. Hyde's story exposes a hard truth. Prayer can be healing or harmful depending on its regulation. God never designed prayer to bypass the body. When prayer disregards embodiment, it becomes like running a marathon without water, noble for a moment, dangerous when repeated. The spiritual realm does not erase the physical, it flows through it. For this reason, one essential applied practice is non-negotiable. Integrate physiology into prayer. Before entering intense intercession, pause for 2 minutes of paced breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4. This small practice stabilizes autonomic function, slows heart rate, enhances vagal tone, and prepares the emotional system for sustained engagement with God. When the body is aligned, the spirit listens differently. Without this alignment, prayer becomes a radio trying to catch a signal with its antenna detached. The transmission may be pure, but the receiver is disordered. Centering breath reconnects the antenna. It teaches the body to support the soul instead of collapsing under its weight. Hyde's story urges us to listen to the whispers of the body before they become the screams of collapse. There is a line in the life of every intercessor where devotion can quietly drift into performance. Not performance in the sense of hypocrisy, but performance as a subtle hunger to see result, to feel useful, affirmed, spiritually productive. John Hyde lived in a world where testimonies spread quickly, where every answered prayer brought new expectations, where results became part of his identity. Many modern believers feel the same pressure, the desire to reproduce breakthrough, to be recognized as powerful, to maintain a reputation for spiritual depth. The pain here is real. The longing for God to move easily morphs into longing for visible outcomes that validate one's place in the kingdom. When prayer becomes a measurement rather than a meeting, the inner life begins to distort. Neurologically, this makes perfect sense. The human brain is wired for reinforcement. Every time someone receives public affirmation, "Your prayer changed my life. You carry something special," dopamine surges. Dopamine is not evil. It is simply the molecule that motivates repetition. But in ministry settings, dopamine can become a dangerous teacher. It subtly rewards dramatic stories, visible results, long hours, and emotional intensity. It begins to encourage the believer to chase the high of spiritual productivity. What feels like zeal may actually be the reward system demanding another hit of affirmation. Pastors, intercessors, and leaders often suffer most because they live in systems where public validation is constant and silent burnout is unnoticed until too late. Without knowing it, the brain begins to crave the applause more than the presence. This is the breakthrough idea. Spiritual productivity can become addictive. Just as a musician may chase applause or an athlete may chase achievement, the intercessor may chase impact, escalating prayer hours, emotional expression, or spiritual output to maintain the internal reward. It is not rebellion, it is biology mixed with calling. But if left unchecked, this addiction slowly leads to identity confusion. The believer begins to define themselves not by who they are in secret, but by what they accomplish in public. When results slow down, despair rises. When testimonies fade, insecurity grows. Eventually, prayer becomes less about communion and more about trying to feel effective. The tragedy is that the person may appear more spiritual than ever while internally becoming fragmented, exhausted, and spiritually malnourished. For this reason, the safeguard is not to abandon intensity but to reclaim secrecy. One powerful, actionable discipline is to schedule weekly moments of unseen prayer. No live stream, no journal to publish, no testimony afterward, no desire for results. Just 20 minutes alone with God without performing even for oneself. This resets the dopamine cycle, detoxes the reward system, and restores prayer to its original nature, a conversation of love, not a metric of success. Without these hidden rhythms, applause becomes a cloak too heavy to remove. Over time, the believer starts mistaking the warmth of the cloak for the warmth of God. Better to return to the place where God is the only witness. Better to rediscover that prayer is who you become, not what you produce. There is a form of spiritual intensity that begins beautifully and ends in isolation. Many intercessors, like John Hyde, start with a burden for souls, a longing to partner with God, a desire for breakthrough, but over time, the private hours, the emotional weight, the deep longing for answers can pull a person away from regular human touchpoints. Family dinners, friendships, rest, shared joy. The pain here is subtle but suffocating. The sense that one must choose between human relationships and spiritual responsibility. Hyde often prayed through the night, bearing emotional loads that no one around him fully understood. Many modern believers carry a similar strain, feeling guilty when resting, ashamed when saying no, afraid that any pause means spiritual failure. Intense prayer without relational anchoring slowly builds a silent loneliness. This loneliness grows because of a powerful emotional dynamic, the martyr narrative. When you believe that you alone must carry the burden, that results depend on your sacrifice, your hours, your tears. Every invitation to rest feels like betrayal. Every request from a loved one feels like obstruction. Over time, relationships become optional, background noise, or even perceived threats to spiritual focus. The intercessor rationalizes isolation. They don't understand. I can't afford to slow down. If I step away, the breakthrough may never come. But this mindset is a double-edged sword. It intensifies devotion, yes, but it also erodes the very support structures required to maintain that devotion. Relationships collapse, emotional reserves shrink, spiritual perspective narrows. The intercessor may appear aflame with passion, yet internally they are burning out in silence. What Hyde's story teaches, painfully, is that sustained spiritual influence requires the opposite of isolation. Accountability is not a burden, it is oxygen. Rest is not faithlessness, it is obedience. Human connection is not a distraction, it is the soil where emotional resilience grows. Intercessors who pray alone for too long eventually pray from depletion instead of overflow. The shift is subtle. Prayer becomes heavier, harsher, more desperate, more frantic. The believer begins interpreting exhaustion as spiritual oppression rather than physiological overload. True authority, however, rises from a rested heart, a regulated nervous system, and a network of relationships that mirror God's own relational nature. Solitude is holy. Isolation is harmful. The line between them is the presence or absence of community. The most life-giving safeguard is a care covenant, one trusted companion who is allowed to speak honestly into your pace, your boundaries, your emotional health. Someone who can say, "Stop, sleep, you're carrying too much." without being dismissed as unspiritual. Add to this a monthly Sabbath where prayer is minimal, activity is slow, and connection is prioritized over productivity. Walks, meals, quiet presence. This rhythm prevents the lighthouse syndrome, burning brightly for others while gradually crumbling from within. A lighthouse does not survive storms because of its light, but because of the team that maintains its structure. Intercessors who try to shine alone eventually collapse, but those who allow themselves to be maintained, emotionally, relationally, physically, become lights that endure. Many believers long for breakthrough the way John Hyde did, crying out with intensity, fasting for days, pleading with God through tears. But longing alone does not create lasting fruit. The pain here is universal. The desire to see God move while lacking the systems, the rhythms, and the emotional stability needed to sustain the movement once it starts. Without structure, fervor burns hot and then collapses. Without integration, spiritual passion produces short spiritual peaks followed by long emotional valleys. Hyde's legacy reveals the cost of raw intercession. Powerful, yes, but often unsustainable without deeper grounding. Countless intercessors today mirror this pattern. Fired by love for God, driven by compassion, yet privately exhausted, unregulated, and unsure how to transform their agony into durable spiritual influence. This is where the integrative concept becomes essential, combining spiritual discipline with psychological tools. Confession releases shame before it becomes compulsion. Lament allows grief to move instead of calcifying into inner pressure. Professional counseling helps reinterpret emotional load and prevent compassion fatigue. Physiological grounding restores the body's capacity for attention and spiritual sensitivity. Mature intercession is not merely praying harder. It is praying from a regulated heart, a clear mind, and a rested body. A form of prayer that produces both power and longevity. John Hyde prayed with his whole being, but his body eventually revealed the cost of unbalanced devotion. Integration is not a departure from spirituality. It is what allows spirituality to flourish without destroying the vessel that carries it. This leads to a surprising reversal. Less unregulated intensity plus more integration often produces deeper, longer-lasting spiritual fruit than raw fervor alone. A believer who spends 20 minutes in emotionally grounded, spirit-led intercession may bear more fruit than someone who prays for hours in dysregulated agony. The difference lies in coherence, the alignment of emotion, physiology, theology, and intention. A calm nervous system hears God more clearly than one in chronic fight or flight. A heart that processes grief can intercede from compassion instead of desperation. A mind shaped by wise counsel discerns more accurately than one clouded by spiritual overexertion. The Spirit works through health, not despite it. Hyde's fervor shook nations, but modern believers can carry his fire with safeguards that he never had access to. To operationalize this, we introduce a 4-part daily template, a path that preserves intensity while preventing collapse. 1. Centering breath, 3 to 5 minutes. Regulate your autonomic state before engaging God. 2. Focused intercession, 20 to 40 minutes. Use scripted intentions or prayer lists to avoid mental fragmentation. 3. Silence and listening, 10 minutes. Allow space for the Spirit to shape interpretation and direction. 4. Grounding practice, 5 minutes. A brief walk, a glass of water, journaling one concrete step, bringing prayer back into embodied reality. At the end of each week, review your emotional patterns with a mentor or trusted friend. This simple structure converts fervor into formation. Like pruning a vine, cutting back excess intensity does not hinder fruit. It multiplies it, season after season. John Hyde's journey forces us to face a paradox most Christians avoid. Fervent prayer can bless and break a person at the same time. His devotion was sincere, burning, and beautiful, but also agonized, lonely, physiologically costly, and psychologically unsustainable. The synthesis here is sobering. Extreme devotion without wisdom becomes self-sacrifice in places God never asked us to bleed. Hyde's life reminds us that fire is powerful, but fire without structure scorches the vessel that carries it. True communion with God, the kind that shakes nations, must be anchored in rhythms that care for the whole person: heart, mind, body, and relationships. The goal is not to dampen zeal but to wisdom-proof it, so passion becomes fruitful rather than destructive. This leads to the invitation: pursue depth, but pair it with safety. Deep prayer does not require self-neglect. In fact, the Spirit often speaks most clearly when our physiology is steady, our emotions are honest, and our relationships are healthy. Intensity paired with regulation becomes discernment. Passion paired with counsel becomes endurance. Solitude paired with accountability becomes transformation. The Holy Spirit, the gentle sanctifier, forms prayer into fruitfulness, not self-exhaustion. Hyde prayed as if the world depended on it. Today we are invited to pray with the same fire, but with the supports that keep our hearts from collapsing under the weight of spiritual longing. So here is the practical takeaway. Choose one integrative practice today and test it for 30 days. Paced breathing before prayer to bring your body into alignment. A weekly accountability conversation so your inner life never becomes invisible. A Sabbath rule where prayer becomes rest rather than striving. These small shifts do not diminish fervor, they expand it. They turn prayer from frantic pleading into sustainable communion. They transform Hyde-like agony into Hyde-like power, minus the collapse. The final image is simple but unforgettable. True intercession is not a single violent thrust, but a sustained, healthy current that reshapes shorelines over decades. It does not drown the intercessor. It flows through them. It reshapes their interior world first, then the world around them. And so the question for you, the one watching this now, becomes unavoidable. Are you cultivating a fire that consumes you, or a fire that warms, heals, and builds? And more importantly, what small change will you make today to keep your heart steady while you pray?